On the day I'd dreamed of for 4 years, I stood in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd for the 2 people I wanted most to see. My parents were there, until they weren't. I watched them rise, whisper something to each other, and walk out before my name was called. My chest tightened, but I forced my smile to stay. Minutes later, I was on stage, staring into blinding lights, delivering words I hadn't planned to say. Words that would explode across national television. They thought they'd heard my story before. This time, I was taking it back. I stood in the narrow hallway behind the stage, the air heavy with the smell of fresh flowers and hairspray. The line of graduating students shuffled forward, tassels swaying, robes rustling like restless waves. I kept scanning the crowd through the side curtain until my eyes landed on them. My parents. They had just arrived, sliding into their seats in the middle row. My smile stretched across my face, but it felt brittle, as if it might crack with the slightest pressure. They were late. Again. The camera boom moved across the audience, catching flashes of proud families holding phones high. As it passed over my parents, I noticed something strange. An empty seat right next to them. One they had saved. Maybe for Ethan, my older brother. But Ethan wasn't here. He hadn't even called me that morning. My gaze lingered on that empty chair, a silent presence reminding me of all the times I'd been second place in my own family. The sight pulled me back to birthdays, where I blew out candles alone because Ethan had a basketball game that everyone needed to attend. To school plays where my applause came from the back row, my parents slipping in halfway through. To family photos where I stood on the far edge, a polite smile while Ethan held the trophy in the center. If it were you, would you still try to earn their love? Would you keep chasing something that always seemed to move one step ahead of you? I straightened my posture and adjusted my cap, forcing myself back into the present. This was supposed to be my day, the one day where the spotlight would shine entirely on me. I could hear the announcer's voice echoing in the auditorium, calling out names, the applause rising and falling like waves on a shore. My heart beat in sync with that rhythm, faster every time the line moved forward. Then, as I glanced over once more, I caught it. A whisper, almost swallowed by the noise. My mother leaned toward my father, her lips barely moving. "We'll leave before she goes up." It was a blade between my ribs. My breath caught, but I kept my eyes ahead. Maybe I misheard. Maybe I didn't. I clenched my hands, nails pressing crescents into my palms. Later, while the ceremony continued, my mind drifted to a memory that had bothered me for months. I'd been home over winter break, wandering into my father's study to borrow a charger. His laptop screen had been open, an email half hidden, but impossible to ignore. Media coverage approval. I hadn't thought much of it then, but now it seemed different. I remembered the strange way they'd been fussing over their outfits that morning, as if the ceremony itself was a photo shoot. The way they mentioned making an appearance, rather than celebrating. The pieces started clicking together in a way I didn't like. My phone buzzed in my robe pocket. I slid it out discreetly, shielding the screen. A message from my cousin popped up. "Your parents are leaving right after your part. They're going to some award thing for Ethan." It wasn't a surprise, not really. It was just another page in a book I knew too well. But then another message followed. "Weird thing is, Ethan didn't even know they were coming. He thought they were staying for you." That stopped me. Why would they skip my moment to attend something my brother didn't even want them at? It didn't make sense. Unless the award was just an excuse. Or maybe it was about being seen somewhere more important. The thought churned in my stomach. My family's public image had always been more polished than the truth. Smiling Christmas cards, glowing Facebook posts about Ethan's achievements, silence about mine. Maybe the ceremony wasn't about me at all. Maybe it was just another stage for them to stand on until a bigger one called. I looked down the line of students ahead of me. The applause swelled again. Somewhere out there, my parents were already counting the minutes until they could walk away. Okay, I thought, feeling my jaw set. If this is a game of chess, I'm not going to keep playing defense. I stepped forward as the line moved, the weight of the moment pressing on me. I didn't know exactly what my next move would be, but I knew one thing. When I made it, they wouldn't see it coming. When the email came, I almost deleted it without reading. It was from the dean's office. Subject line, Commencement Speaker Selection. My thumb hovered over the screen until my brain caught up. My name was in the opening line. They wanted me to deliver the student address at graduation. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart doing this uneven thump that felt half exhilaration, half fear. I typed a quick, yes. I'd be honored before I could overthink it. Then I slid my phone face down on the desk. My parents didn't need to know. Not yet. That night, Maya came over with a pizza so loaded with toppings it bent the box. We sat cross-legged on my dorm floor, devouring slices and laughing over memories we usually kept buried. I told her about the year Ethan got a car for his birthday while I got a maybe next year and a pat on the shoulder. She told me about her mum forgetting to pick her up from summer camp. Somewhere between the cheese and the laughter, tears slid down my cheeks. Not from sadness exactly, but from the rare relief of being seen. "You're going to kill it up there," Maya said, pointing at me with the crust of her slice. "I don't even know what I'm going to say yet," I admitted. "Then say the thing you've been choking on for years." 2 days later, another email dropped into my inbox. Note: ceremony will be broadcast on national television. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just a speech anymore. It was a live microphone to the entire country. I opened a blank document and typed 2 headings: safe version and truth version. One to keep the peace, one to burn it down. Weeks blurred into late nights and too much coffee. I spent hours in the library drafting lines, only to delete them and start again. My notes filled with phrases like invisible child and measuring worth in silence. I didn't realize how much weight I'd been carrying until I started putting it into words. One evening, exhaustion got the better of me. I fell asleep at a table in the library, my head pillowed on my arm. When I woke up, my laptop screen had gone dark, and the clock read 7:45 p.m., 15 minutes past my meeting with the commencement committee. I sprinted across campus, my robe catching on the door handle, but the meeting was still going. Breathless, I slipped into a chair. The faculty advisor, Dr. Lewis, looked at me over his glasses. "You've been given a rare opportunity, Harper," he said. "Don't waste it trying to make everyone comfortable. The right words can change more than you think." The morning of graduation, the air was bright and sharp, the kind of day that makes everything feel just a little more possible. I could see my parents as I filed into the auditorium, my father in his navy blazer, my mother in a pale blue dress. They clapped when I walked past, but their eyes kept flicking to their watches, to the doors. The ceremony unfolded like clockwork. Names called, hands shaken, photographs snapped. I stood in the wings, holding my speech, my palms damp. Through the gap in the curtain, I watched them. My mother leaned over to whisper something. My father nodded. Then, without ceremony, they both rose to their feet. I felt it before I fully saw it, that hollow drop in my stomach. They stepped into the aisle, walking toward the exit. My throat tightened, but my feet stayed planted. The urge to run after them burned in my chest, but I swallowed it down. They were leaving, and I wasn't going to stop them. After the ceremony let out for intermission, I slipped into a quiet hallway at the back of the building, away from the rush of gowns and applause. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number as before. I hesitated, then answered. "Harper?" a man's voice asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. "This is David. We've met once or twice. Your mother's cousin from upstate?" It took me a moment to place him. A faint memory of a man with kind eyes at a reunion years ago. "I didn't want to text something like this without speaking to you," he continued. "I saw your parents leave. And I think you should know something. Your father isn't, well, your biological father." The words landed like a hammer. I pressed my back against the wall, the noise of the crowd muffled through the doors. "What are you talking about?" "It's complicated," he said softly. "Your mother dated someone in college. He was a renowned speaker, traveled the country. They split before you were born. She met your father later, and he raised you as his own. But I think some of the distance you feel from him might come from that." My thoughts spun wildly, fragments of memory rearranging themselves. The way my father would sometimes introduce me with a hint of detachment, the missing features when I compared old family photos, my mother's careful silences. David sighed. "I'm telling you because maybe some of what you're feeling isn't just in your head." When the call ended, I leaned there for a long time, my heart pounding. A strange mix of emotions swirled. Shock, yes, but also something else. That man, the one David mentioned, had been a public speaker. Was that where my pull toward words and audiences came from? It was a thread I hadn't known existed, now humming in my veins. But as I stood there, another image pushed forward. My mother, late at night, standing alone in the kitchen, her shoulders shaking as she cried quietly into a dish towel. I'd watched from the hallway when I was 10, not understanding. Now I felt an ache I couldn't name. Part sympathy, part anger. She had carried her own battles, but she had also let me carry mine alone. I pulled my speech from my folder and stared at it. The safe version suddenly felt like a lie I didn't have the energy to maintain. I drew a thick line through half the pages, replacing paragraphs with the truth. About invisibility, about family, about finding your voice even when it shakes. By the next morning, I was in Professor Lewis's office. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses. "So, you've decided to tell them," he said. "I have to," I said, "but I need to make sure I do it right." He nodded slowly. "Then let's work on it. And let's work on you." That's how my next weeks unfolded. Afternoons in his office, mornings practicing alone in the auditorium, and one terrifying evening going live on a private stream so I could watch myself back. I stumbled, corrected, grew stronger. My words began to land with more weight, more intention. One night, after a particularly intense session, Professor Lewis suggested recording it. "You might learn something from how people respond," he said. I didn't expect the file to leave his computer, but by the weekend, an influencer on TikTok had clipped 30 seconds of my rehearsal. Just me saying, "Sometimes the loudest silence is the one inside your own family." It was captioned with, "Leather Speak." Within hours, the hashtag was everywhere. Comments poured in from strangers. "This is my story too. Say it louder. We're listening." Then came the twist I hadn't seen coming. A producer from a major news network emailed the university. They wanted to air the graduation ceremony live, citing high public interest. My stomach flipped. This was no longer just a local event. It was going to be national. I told myself this was good. This was what I wanted. But deep down, I also knew it meant there was nowhere to hide. 3 days before graduation, I was sitting in the student lounge when I saw her, my mother, walking across campus in her pale blue coat, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete. She wasn't smiling. I stepped outside to meet her halfway. "Mom, what are you doing here?" She looked me up and down, her expression tight. "I heard the ceremony will be televised," she said, "and I heard about your speech." My pulse quickened. "From who?" "Doesn't matter," she said briskly. "I spoke to the dean. There's still time to change the program. I can deliver the family remarks instead. It would be safer." For a second, I couldn't even speak. She was standing there, suggesting she'd take my place, as if the culmination of years of work could be handed over like a casserole dish. I forced a smile that felt like glass about to shatter. "I'm the student speaker, Mom. I'm not handing that over." Her lips pressed together. "Think about what you're doing, Harper. Some things are better left unsaid." I watched her walk away, the click of her heels fading, my heart pounding with something that felt a lot like defiance. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back. When I stepped off the stage, my pulse was still hammering from the final words of my speech. The applause had followed me down the steps, but the real storm was waiting in my phone. By the time I reached the quiet of the green room, the screen was lit with hundreds, no thousands, of notifications. 500 messages sat in my inbox. Some were from people I hadn't spoken to since high school. Others were complete strangers. "I've lived this too. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. You just told my story." The hashtag #JerLetherSpeak was still trending, paired now with clips from my speech, shaky phone footage from the audience, and reactions from viewers across the country. I hadn't even had time to process it when my phone rang. My parents' names flashed on the screen. For a moment, I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Harper!" My father's voice was sharp, tight. "You need to take that video down, right now." I gripped the phone tighter. "What?" "You've embarrassed us in front of everyone we know." My mother's voice cut in, trembling but firm. "People are calling. The family." "I didn't embarrass you," I interrupted, my voice low but steady. "I told the truth." There was a pause, heavy and brittle. "You don't understand," my mother said finally, her voice breaking in a way I'd rarely heard. "We left the ceremony because—" She trailed off, a breath catching on the line. "Because we got a call. Ethan was in a car accident." For a moment, everything inside me went quiet. The applause, the messages, the anger, all of it dimmed under the sudden weight of those words. "What?" I whispered. "It wasn't serious," my father added quickly. "Not at first, but we didn't know. We didn't want to ruin your moment, so we left quietly." My knees felt unsteady. I sank into a chair, trying to make sense of it. The image of them walking out played over in my head, colliding with this new information. The pieces didn't quite fit, but they didn't feel entirely false either. After we hung up, I sat in that room for a long time, staring at my hands. Guilt began to creep in, slow and sharp-edged. Had I stood on that stage and thrown a match into my family without knowing the full truth? But then another feeling rose behind it, an old, familiar ache. Even if their reason was real, they hadn't trusted me enough to tell me. They'd decided, again, that I was better off in the dark. By that evening, the internet had divided into two camps. Some praised me for my honesty and courage. Others accused me of airing family matters in public, of being ungrateful. Headlines popped up. Graduation speech goes viral. Courage or cruelty? I scrolled through the comments until the words blurred together, alternating between praise and condemnation. Maya texted, "Ignore the noise. You did what you had to do." But the noise was louder than I wanted to admit. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time it was Ethan. His voice was rough but steady. "I'm okay," he said before I could ask. "Bruises, a sprained wrist, nothing worse." I heard what happened with Mom and Dad. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "I didn't know, Ethan. I swear, I didn't know." "I believe you," he said. Then there was a pause, and his tone shifted. "But there's something else you don't know, and you need to hear it from me." I sat up straighter. "What is it?" "You'll have to come see me," he said. "It's not something I want to say over the phone." There was a finality in his voice that made my stomach tighten. I didn't know if I was ready for another truth, but it was coming for me all the same. The first time I saw Ethan after the accident, he was propped up in a hospital bed, his arm in a sling and his hair a mess of cowlicks. He grinned when he saw me, but there was something softer in his eyes, something that looked almost like relief. "I heard your speech," he said once I'd sat down. "And before you ask, I think you were brave." I laughed once, short and humorless. "Brave? Half the internet thinks I'm selfish." He shook his head. "Harper, I need to tell you something. I've always known Mom and Dad treated me differently. I knew I was the favorite." His voice dropped. "But it wasn't a crown. It was a weight. Every win I had, every game, every award. It wasn't just for me. It was for them. I couldn't screw up, I couldn't breathe wrong. Being the golden child is just another kind of cage." Something in my chest cracked open. I'd always thought of us as opposite poles. Him in the light, me in the shadow. But maybe we'd both been stuck in different prisons. My eyes blurred before I could stop them. I stood and wrapped my arms around him, careful of his sling. For the first time in our lives, it felt like we were standing on the same side. In the weeks that followed, I started therapy. My therapist didn't wave a magic wand or hand me tidy solutions. She gave me tools. How to feel without drowning. How to forgive without forgetting. How to keep a boundary without building a wall so high no one could climb it. I learned that forgiveness wasn't a gift for the other person. It was something you gave yourself to stop bleeding from the same wound. One Tuesday afternoon, as I was leaving the campus library, an email pinged into my inbox. The subject line read, "TEDx invitation. Your story matters." I stopped walking and stared at the screen. They wanted me to give a talk based on my graduation speech to an audience of hundreds, with thousands more watching online. My hands shook as I read it twice, then a third time, and just as the excitement was settling in, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. "We heard about the TED Talk," she said without preamble. "Your father and we'd like to come." I hesitated. "It's not exactly the kind of thing you've shown interest in before." "I know," she said quietly. "But maybe it's time we listened." The night of the TED Talk, the lights were blinding, the red carpet circle under my feet warm from the stage bulbs. My parents sat in the third row, their hands clasped tightly together. When I began, I didn't speak about resentment or blame. I spoke about the power of being seen, about the damage of comparison, about the quiet erosion that happens when love feels conditional. I told them the invisible child can grow into an invisible adult, unless someone decides to step forward into the light. When the applause came, it wasn't just polite. It was a wave that seemed to lift me off my feet. I saw my mother wipe her eyes, my father leaning in to say something to her, for once. I didn't wonder what. In the months that followed, we began a strange, tentative experiment. Family dinners once a week with one rule. No comparisons. No, Ethan did this, or Harper did that. Just conversation. It felt awkward at first, like learning a new language. But slowly, it became something we all looked forward to. Then came another twist. An email from the International Fellowship Committee landed in my inbox. Full scholarship awarded. Program begins in Oxford this fall. My breath caught as I read the details. The kind of opportunity that could change the course of my career. I was still reeling when my father called to remind me that their 30th wedding anniversary was in September. The date? The exact week I was supposed to fly out. I closed my laptop slowly, the weight of two paths pressing on me. The choice wasn't between staying and going. It was between the person I'd always been and the person I was becoming. I didn't make the decision lightly. The Oxford program was everything I'd worked toward, a door swinging open into the life I'd dreamed of. But the idea of leaving without showing up for my parents' 30th anniversary sat in my chest like a stone. For years I'd wished they'd choose me. Maybe it was time I chose them. Not out of obligation, but out of the person I wanted to become. So I wrote to the fellowship coordinator, asking if I could push my start date by 1 week. The reply came quickly. "We'd be happy to accommodate you." Relief washed over me, chased by a flutter of nerves. The anniversary dinner was held at my aunt's sprawling backyard, strung with golden lights. The long table was crowded with family, cousins, uncles, old family friends. I arrived with Ethan, who still wore his sling but insisted on carrying the dessert. Halfway through the meal, my father rose, tapping his glass with a spoon. "We wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began. His voice wavered, and he glanced at my mother. She stood, taking his hand. "There's something else," she said. "We've made mistakes. Many. And some of those mistakes hurt the people we love the most." Her eyes found mine, and for once, she didn't look away. "Harper, in front of everyone here, we're sorry. For the times we didn't see you. For the times we didn't hear you." The table was silent, save for the sound of the wind rustling the string lights. I swallowed hard, the words catching somewhere between my throat and my heart. "I hear you," I said finally. "And I'm here." It wasn't a sweeping forgiveness, not a magic erasure of the past. But it was a beginning. A week later, I was boarding a plane at JFK, my carry-on stowed above me, my passport tucked into my bag. As we taxied down the runway, I glanced at my phone one last time, before switching it to airplane mode. A notification blinked at the top of the screen. A message request from someone I didn't know. "I'm 17. I watched your graduation speech. My family treats me like I don't exist. I thought about running away. Then I saw you. You made me think maybe I could stay and fight for myself. You saved me." My eyes blurred, and I tilted the phone toward the window, letting the clouds outside soften into white haze. I didn't know her name, but I knew exactly how she felt. Oxford was a whirlwind, lectures in centuries-old halls, coffee with classmates from around the globe, long walks along cobblestone streets. But in the quiet moments, I kept thinking about that girl and the hundreds of others who'd written to me since my speech. By the end of my first term, I'd started writing again. Longer pieces this time. More than just speeches. I poured my story onto the page, not as a wound to reopen, but as a map for someone else to follow out of the dark. The book took shape slowly, chapters forming like the careful stitching of a seam. I called it Invisible No More. The day it was published, my inbox filled again. Not with strangers this time, but with invitations. book signings, panels, interviews, and one email that caught my eye. We'd like to feature you as the keynote speaker at the International Education Summit. The conference hall was massive, filled with rows of chairs that seemed to stretch forever. I stood backstage, my notes in hand, breathing in the low hum of the crowd. When I walked out under the lights, I spotted them instantly. My parents, seated in the front row. My father's arm rested along the back of my mother's chair, their hands clasped tightly together. I began the way I always did now. Not with my own story, but with the stories of others. The students who'd written to me, the teachers who'd recognized the invisible ones, the parents who'd learned to listen differently. And then I told them what I'd come to believe. Fair love isn't instinct. It's a choice. We choose to see, to hear, to hold space for those who've been overlooked. And we keep choosing every day, even when it's hard, even when it means unlearning what we thought we knew. When I finished, the applause rose like a tide, filling every corner of the hall. My parents stood with everyone else, but their eyes stayed locked on mine, pride shining clear and steady. For the first time, I believed they saw me, not just the version of me they'd wanted, but all of me.